Previously on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
I didn't find myself in my voice in my native language, Polish. I was always very talkative, but I kind of didn't feel understood.
You know, people talk about this thing called the bright, shiny object syndrome, as if we all need to avoid anything that interests us or anything that we're curious, because everything's a distraction and you have to just stay on focus, stay on task.
I think real bravery is when a man or a woman stops and asks themselves, is this the life I want to live?
It's nefarious, man. Like, the brain works in fucked up ways.
The mind is one of the most deceiving, manipulative pieces of equipment, flesh, human bodies on earth. I never have trusted my brain.
All of that weight lives in your head, and you are the decision maker.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Hi, it's Ronsley. If this is your first volume, welcome. This is a weekly series where I go inside the mind of an entrepreneur, artist, athlete, academic to decipher what is the psychology of our decisions. I'm Australian and I'd like to acknowledge our traditional custodians of country where I live and work. I pay my respects to elders past, present, and emerging, and acknowledge our continuous connection and contribution to land, sea, and community. Freedoms. Do you take your freedom for granted? Or lack of freedoms? Do you even realize that you may not have some freedom? Yes, I'm asking hard questions to begin with, only because I think it's important for context. And you can listen to this volume through the lens of asking an important question. The important question being, what freedoms am I giving away without even knowing it? I'd want to know that. And sometimes we don't actually want to find out because it means that we've been wrong until this point. And our minds are very interesting organs in the sense that we blatantly avoid asking ourselves some really important questions. So, please, I want you to be open to whatever comes up for you. And I'd like to know what most makes sense to you while you listen to this show. So, follow me on Clubhouse at Ronsley. Follow the club, the Psychology of Entrepreneurship, the links to which you'll find in the show notes at thepsychologyoфentrepreneurship.com. Today's conversation is a campfire chat with some of my famous friends. We obviously did this on Clubhouse, but Tiago and Kaylee and Corinne and Beth worked really hard to edit this podcast down to the highlights of the conversation. This Clubhouse was a 90-minute conversation that is curated for your consumption. So we removed the things that you didn't need to hear. This conversation is around our freedoms, the freedom of money, freedom of speech, thought, life. And to start off with, this is Brad Mills, and he focuses on money and how broken it is. And he starts explaining how money creates more gaps than builds bridges due to how wealth is distributed and how the money culture works in societies in general. This is Brad.
Money is one of the most broken things that we have right now, and it touches everybody's lives. And money right now, the way that it's used is used as a way to keep people, I guess, like, not on purpose, but maybe on purpose, but regardless if it's on purpose or not, just keep people in debt and continue to help the people at the top make more money and actually increase the wealth inequality gap and hurt the Gini coefficient, it's called in economics. It's the distribution of wealth in the currency. And the way that the central banks control the money, like the central banks actually have policies that hurt poor people. So poor people are getting hurt all the time, whether it's inflation or the devaluation of their dollars or debt, the trend of debt being replaced by, or money being replaced by debt. So everybody now in our generation and Gen Zs, they're preyed on by banks. As soon as they become old enough to take on debt, they're encouraged to take debt. They have these booths at colleges and universities where they try to get you on credit cards, and it's just kind of disgusting the way that banks treat us like just profit meat. And it's like developing really bad habits and kind of stealing wealth from an entire generation. And then the generation is told, well, you can just earn money and pay back your debt and then live the American dream or whatever the dream is, while at the same time they're printing trillions and trillions of dollars, devaluing the dollars that people have saved. And this isn't just a US thing, it's everywhere. So it's a global problem. All fiat currencies are being devalued by printing too much of them, and it punishes all the savers. So our parents and generations that have been raised to pay off your debt, work your job, save for retirement, pay into your pension, and then the government will take care of you and you'll have a retirement fund. That's not going to exist for our generation, most likely. And even if it does exist, it's pretty much guaranteed that the purchasing power of all the money that you saved your whole life is going to go down and down and down, because they got to keep printing trillions and trillions of dollars. So it's just totally unfair. And it touches everybody's life. It's worse in countries like overseas in developing nations and stuff, where their currencies are actually hyperinflating. But we're going to start feeling it more and more in the West, because last year the government printed, I think it was like $7 trillion in the US, and the entire money supply inflated by 25%. Like something like 25% of all money that's ever been printed in existence was printed last year.
Then Scott Mitchell chimed in with the freedom of thought and how it can't be taken away from us, but we have to constantly reclaim it, because it's the only element we can control to have the power of communicating and contributing. This is Scott.
First, I'm going to take this in a slightly different direction, just in the sense that I think there's a lot of reasons to be optimistic here too, because I think, first of all, we live in a profound time right now. And this conversation is important because when we're in a place where there's more opportunity than ever, which there is as a result of our technological kind of growth and progress, there's also more risk than ever. Opportunity and risk are kind of two sides to the same coin. So on the one hand, and I'll tell you why I'm optimistic and also pessimistic at the same time here, is that there's more opportunity than ever. But I think that the critical thing to talk about when we're talking about freedom is that all freedom starts with our freedom of thought. And no one can take that away from you except yourself. And we take it away from ourselves all the time. And so it doesn't matter what's happening around us in terms of it, we can't control that, right? We have to do the best with what we have. But if we can start to reclaim our thoughts, if we can say, and the things that stop us from being free in our thoughts are the kinds of stories we tell ourselves, right? It's the kind of questions we ask ourselves. It's the kind of information we consume and put into our minds. And if we stop and start becoming aware of those, what are the questions we're asking ourselves? What are the kinds of stories we're telling ourselves? What's the information we're consuming? Then we can start to say, hey, wait a second. Who am I and how can I contribute? How can I take this amazing gift of life that I've been given and turn it into something really extraordinary and special? And by doing that, contribute to others. Because to me, if we're going to talk about freedom and we talk about all these physical freedoms that could external freedoms that could be potentially taken away, like with money or with work or with freedom of speech, the way that we reclaim those and the way that we protect those is by stepping up. And I think first starting by contributing and also by being effective at communicating. Because if we contribute and communicate, that equals power. And Ronsley talks about this a lot, this power to have an audience, to have a platform. This is really important. And this the spirit of doing things from a place of contribution. Look, there's a lot that's not great about the world right now. We have more problems than ever in human history. But the crazy thing about that is problems are opportunities. If there weren't problems to fix, we wouldn't have anything to take all these amazing gifts inside we've been given to use them. And so if we start with how do we truly get into becoming free in our thoughts, managing and mastering our minds, and then contributing to others and learning how to communicate effectively, we can take back all of these freedoms, and we can do it in a way that's empowering to others. And I think that's really the main essence I wanted to say. And I think this is an incredible time, but it really matters how each one of us show up. And so I think it starts with the freedom of thought.
In the United States, the General Social Survey, or GSS, gathers information every 2 years on a wide variety of topics. In the year 2000, GSS asked adult Americans about their attitudes about freedom. 25% of people asked said that they were moderately free, while about 70% said that in general, Americans as a whole were completely or very free. Although this information alone wasn't surprising, GSS also revealed that people who said that they were completely or very free were twice as likely to say that they were very happy about their lives, while people that said that they were moderately free reported being unhappy or not very happy. Even taking income, gender, education, race, religion, politics, and family status into account, they found that people who felt free were about 20% more likely than others to say that they were very happy. In short, people who saw themselves as free were happy.
And then somehow the conversation got to Brad again, talking about the cheat code to capitalism. So this is Brad Mills again.
The most important thing to identify is that a lot of people feel pissed off about the way that the money is getting abused. And Wall Street is getting bailed out constantly. And I forget who it was earlier that said this, but there's kind of like a frustration as well with corporations and capitalism itself. But it's not actually a capitalist system that we live in for the top people, the 0.1%, because they actually have a system it's like a cheat code on capitalism. Somebody like Bill Gates or Elon Musk or, name any successful entrepreneur, Warren Buffett, whatever, they have to even abide by the same rules of capitalism that most of us have to abide by. Like they don't get free money by just clicking a few keystrokes and like poof, like free money's printed. So the people at the very, very top have a cheat code. Like they're not actually operating on a capitalist system. So capitalism really isn't the problem, but it gets a lot of the flack. And people blame capitalism. People see companies making tons of money while there's like people starving and people homeless, and wealth inequality is rising, inflation is rising, cost of things are going down to make, but we're paying more for them. So there's things like that are kind of really frustrating for people to see. And obviously people get pissed off when they see bailouts and they see banks getting hundreds of billions of dollars or trillions of dollars, central banks printing money, giving it to them. And then companies like Boeing get bailed out when they took too much risk. And then they get 500 billion or whatever the hell it was. It was a lot of money they got in the COVID bailout package. So people get frustrated, they get pissed off. So it is good to learn about value and money, and that will inevitably lead you to Bitcoin, because everybody's seeing the results of what's been happening since 2008 with the money printing. And people are just feeling frustrated, and there's this baseline frustration, but not everybody can identify what they're mad at or where the unfairness is. So that's why Bitcoin is amazing for most people to learn about, because it kind of lets you identify, okay, where's the problem and what is value and what is money and who is taking advantage more. And is it actually like, do we need a socialist system? Do we need a capitalist system? Is a combination of both a good answer? And when you learn more about Bitcoin, you learn more about value and freedom and rights. And a lot of people see Bitcoin rise, and then they think, oh, well, I'm not a trader, or I'm not an investor, or I can't afford a whole Bitcoin. Those are really common things people see, or they feel like a lot of our friends, Ronsley, in our entrepreneur group, feel like anti-FOMO. Like we work hard to have mental health as a priority and master your degenerate urges and like try to be a healthy person. And when you see something that like makes you feel that feeling of like, oh shit, I need to get some of that, or I need to participate in this trend or whatever, a lot of us that are trying to have a healthier way of living will actually resist that urge, because it's just a trend, it's just a bubble, and I don't want to participate in that. I want to focus on my path, you know? So I feel like Bitcoin's got a bad rap because for folks like that, because there are a lot of like charlatans that are trying to do crypto stuff, and Bitcoin and crypto gets really kind of like lumped in together. And as Bitcoiners, I mean, me and Jimmy probably like can agree there that like it's so frustrating to see people think Bitcoin and crypto and like you see all these crazy bubbles popping up even in the cryptocurrency space. But really what the main thing is for people to just like learn about Bitcoin and how it can help you. And the common things are, you don't need to buy a whole Bitcoin. There's 100 million units in a Bitcoin. It's just like the asset of Bitcoin is important to protect yourself from all that stuff we talked about earlier. The central banks are going to take advantage of you, print money, give it to the 0.1%, and then the taxpayer gets burdened with paying that money back. And the money that's been printed actually devalues the money in your bank account. So it's like, damn, you're getting hit and hit and hit. So Bitcoin is just like the lifeboat. That's sort of common phrase in the Bitcoin space. It's like the lifeboat. It's the opt-out. It's like vote with your money by exiting money and going into Bitcoin, which is better money.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
Our aim with this audio documentary has always been to build a strong community of entrepreneurs and creatives to provide a space where they can use their voice to share their authenticity with the world. As a valued listener, your voice matters too. We love to hear your feedback and ideas, so don't be shy to let us know how we're doing in the ratings and comments. If you have a message for our production team or know someone who would be a perfect fit as a guest, you can find out more information on how to share your input at psychologyofentrepreneurship.com.
This conversation makes us go deeper into the whole Bitcoin conversation, but Jimmy Song chimed in with the freedom of speech. He says freedom of speech is an extension of our property rights as well as time and work.
Speech is also about property. Hans Hermann Hoppe has a really good book on this. Talking about how freedom of speech is really about where you're doing that speech. If you're shouting fire in a movie theater, you're kind of disturbing the peace of everybody that's there, and that's violating the property rights of the person that owns the theater. If you are, saying whatever you want in your own home, that's not a violation of anyone's speech, because that's your house. You get to do whatever you want with it. So speech, in a sense, is an extension of property rights. And I would also argue that time and work are, in some sense, your property, right? Your ability to work, your ability to provide something for other people. And certainly your time is a part of that. And that is all wrapped up in this idea of property, your ability to own something. When you don't have property rights over your own time, that's what you're called a slave, because somebody else controls your time, right? If you don't have property rights over your own work, then you're also called a slave because somebody's taking the fruit of your labor and so on. So all that is to give you a framework by which to understand Bitcoin, because it is ultimately a property right that is stronger than any property right that we have ever had. And that is sort of the main feature of it. All of these other things, money or gold or your house or whatever, they can essentially be taken away from you. They can be seized. They can be interfered with, messed around with, taxed, and all sorts of things. And that means that you don't really have it as much as you would think. Similar thing with your work and time, right? Like there are taxes that you have to pay as a result of work. So you don't really own all of your time or work. Speech is limited by whatever the government tells you, especially on public property, which is not really well defined who actually owns it and so on. So Bitcoin, on the other hand, is something that you truly own. If you own Bitcoin, it is not like gold. Executive Order 6102 in 1933 was issued by FDR, and basically said no one is allowed to own gold anymore. And he basically seized gold from every private citizen. That was what happened with gold. That is going to be much more difficult with Bitcoin. Now, the reason why Executive Order 6102 worked was because all the banks had all of the gold, right? Like, people didn't carry around gold. They carried around dollar bills, which were redeemable for gold. At the time, it was $20.67 to get 1 ounce of gold. So all of the gold was in one place, so it was very easy for the government to come and seize it. And that's the effect of centralization. But people that held gold in their, under their mattress or in their safe or something like that, most of them just sort of held on. They didn't voluntarily go and submit the gold as per Executive Order 6102. They thought it was a violation of their property rights, so they just sort of kept quiet about it, didn't tell anybody, and that's kind of what happened. With Bitcoin, that property right is even stronger because it's not a physical item that someone can take away. It's in that sense metaphysical. It's a secret that you can keep in your brain. In fact, you can memorize a set of 12 words, and it's a property right that is stronger than any property right that anyone's ever had. Like, if you seize somebody's money, it's pretty easy. If somebody goes to jail, you can seize their money by because it's in some bank or something like that, and you can sue them or do something with them. Some judge can essentially release that money to you. They can't do that with Bitcoin. And that means that because you have those strong property rights, it means that you really have way more freedom than you would otherwise. There's no, at least with that property, there's no forcible taking away of it. And that's ultimately what makes Bitcoin really special. Now, what gives it that property? What gives it that property is decentralization. There is no central authority, no third party that you have to trust, like a bank or a PayPal or American Express or the Federal Reserve or any central bank or anything. You don't have to trust anybody. It is yours, and it is decentralized. It's like kind of like a metaphysical nugget of gold. You can hold it and no one can take it away from you unless you want to give it to them. The difference between Bitcoin and all the altcoins is that all of the altcoins are not decentralized. They have a single point of failure. They have somebody that's in charge. They have some choke point, as you might call it, from a regulatory standpoint, where the government can come in and say, we are regulating this particular thing, and you are going to do what we say because we are going to control this one particular part of your network. That makes it so that we can grab all your money or make you do what we say. That's the big difference. It's that ultimately the thing that makes Bitcoin special are these strong property rights that you have over it, which gives us more freedom, gives us more self-sovereignty. All these altcoins, they have third-party dependency, so they're not really any better, at least in that sense, than fiat money or any other kind of property.
Bitcoin uses peer-to-peer technology to operate with no central authority or banks. Managing transactions and the issuing of Bitcoins is carried out collectively by the network. Bitcoin is considered open source. This means its design is public, so nobody owns or controls it, and everyone and anyone can take part.
This conversation went all into the freedom of money. It seemed like everyone suddenly just cared most about the money that we owned or didn't own. And then the most important question became, when should we buy some Bitcoin? And who better to ask than someone who is the expert in the Bitcoin game? Ladies and gentlemen, Jimmy Song.
The first Bitcoin I bought was like under $10. And the whole time it was running up from $10 to $100, I was like, I can't buy anymore because I could have bought more at $10. But that's something that you just sort of have to get over. This is the monetizing of an asset, and it will sort of grow over time. And because of its absolute scarcity, as time goes on, it tends to grow. So the advice I would give if you do want to keep saving is something called dollar cost averaging, which is just buy a fixed amount in dollar terms every week or something, every month or whatever. And this is a good way to sort of like not miss out, and at the same time, like, get yourself used to the current price. There's something about the act of buying at the current price that anchors you to it again instead of the previous price. So even a little bit kind of helps. And especially in a bull market like this, if you do believe in Bitcoin, that's the way to do it, because oftentimes what people ask is, oh, do you think it's going to go up, keep going up, or do you think it's going to dip soon? Really what they're asking is, should I get in right now, or should I wait a little bit to get in when it dips or something like that? Nobody really knows. And this is why we recommend dollar cost averaging, because ultimately it's going to be some average, and you're not going to get the absolute lowest, but you're not going to get absolutely screwed either at the top. So like dollar cost averaging will help you out. And certainly, if you are interested, I would refer you to a bunch of tutorials on YouTube about taking custody of your own Bitcoin, especially off of Coinbase. There are solutions. Like I said, it can be a little scary because it's like having a gold bar in your house, but it's a lot easier to secure than a gold bar because there are pins and all sorts of things that people would need access to in order to get it.
Jimmy mentioned decentralized money before, so I wanted him to explain that concept because that was kind of an open loop.
China banned local Bitcoins. And what did people do? They went on Telegram groups, WeChat groups, and they just did peer-to-peer trading. There wasn't really anything the government could do, because at that point, it's like person A is meeting person B to go exchange yuan for Bitcoin and like back. And it's kind of like, well, what are you going to do if two people it's very difficult for the government to get in the middle of every single transaction, especially Bitcoin transactions, because there's no way to get in between them. They're peer to peer. You don't. It's very difficult to sort of enforce that kind of rule. And besides that, there are the government certainly doesn't like losing control of the money, but there's also generally a component of most governments where there's somebody that's at least fiscally thinking, okay, well, I don't want them to print all the money in the world, because that'll probably lead to hyperinflation and lead to all sorts of social unrest and things like that. So they want some curbs, and they, for them, they realize what's going on in the streets, and they say, well, if we ban Bitcoin, then these people aren't going to be able to do anything, right? Like we're just making them suffer. So, the short answer basically is that they can try, but because of its decentralized nature, they're going to have a very tough time of it. It'd be like saying, the government banned BitTorrent years ago and said, you're not allowed to download movies via BitTorrent. That didn't stop it. Plenty of people still download via BitTorrent. Passing a law doesn't necessarily change all that much, other than, some people, there's a risk premium now because you might run afoul of the law and you might have to pay fines or maybe even prison time or whatever. But generally, like, there's a market clearing price, and what people will continue to transact in it, especially if it stores value as well as it has.
And before we wound up this conversation, Anna Vicino, my dear friend Anna Vicino, a comic for NBC and does some amazing work, decided that she needed to remind us about empowerment and how we should not depend on the government to rule over how we feel about our lives and our choices.
I tell this to people all the time. If you're ever in a position where you need who is president to affect whether you're doing okay in your personal life, you're in a bad position and you need to get yourself more empowered. Figure out what that is. So don't blame the government, even though the government sucks. Don't get me wrong. We don't like them having their ways or whatever. And sometimes they do good things, but regardless, you don't ever want to find yourself in a position where the government has to rule how you feel about yourself, your money, your family, your choices, your aspirations. And so then you kind of go from there and you kind of peel it back and kind of step from opportunity to opportunity and grow it. So that was a very long way of saying all of that.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
coming up on the Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
And fundamentally, what makes a cryptocurrency valuable is the censorship resistance and the decentralization.
If you ask him, where's your money in a bank account? He would say, well, it's at the bank. But where in the bank? Well, it's in the vault. Well, which of that money is yours? Well, then he wouldn't be able to tell you. It's not about bells and whistles around the money that make it valuable. The thing that money needs more than anything else is credible long-term scarcity. This is why the dollar is just terrible money at this point.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
That conversation has been a little slice of heaven. So we're going to do more of those. And if you're interested to hear them live and join us live, and we would love to hear your voice in whatever capacity it allows us to, please follow the Psychology of Entrepreneurship Club on Clubhouse and also follow me at Ronsley. It would be amazing to get you on and get your perspective on different things. In the meantime, go have fun.
Psychology of Entrepreneurship.
This is a Must Amplify production. Special thanks to every guest expert that has appeared on the show. Editing, voiceovers, and sound design by Kaylee Bonnyman and Tiago Vega. Guest research by Jenna Elliott. Content by Corinne Castles. Project managed by the legend that is Kaylee Bonnyman. Produced and hosted by me, Ronsley Vaz. For more episodes and way to listen, go to mustamplify.com/POE.
Love the polished audio docuseries style of this podcast, The Psychology of Entrepreneurship? At We Are Podcast, you can learn how to create a similar style for your own show. This revolutionary virtual event assembles podcasters, entrepreneurs, and marketers in one spot, so you're able to learn from the masters. Head straight to wearepodcast.com to reserve your spot at our next event.